Space Center. It is holding right now at the 9-minute mark, and this is a hold that we had been telling everybody about all morning. We knew it was coming. This is the hold, the very critical hold, where Launch Commander Bob Crippen makes his final decision as to whether or not the Discovery should launch this morning. And we've had some problems that were large enough to delay things and some minor problems that have added up to sort of a delicate situation, I guess. Jim Mizell with me again now. He's been here at NASA for 30 years and former operations manager. During this hold at the 9-minute point, what exactly goes on in there?
Well, the launch director, Bob Seek, is presently talking to everyone in the firing room, and they're going over all the paperwork and all the launch mission rule measurements, the critical measurements, to see if everything has been taken care of. They will not come out of this hold until they have everything straight. We
talked earlier now, remember, about 10:59 being the new launch time. That is not the case now, is that right?
1:59 would probably be the new launch time at the end of the window, okay?
Yes.
They can hold up to 1:59 if necessary.
Okay.
But once they pick up the count on the clock, they will go straight through from that 9-minute point on down.
From the 9 minutes left
yes,
of the launch at that point.
Right.
But we could hold at 9 between, well, an hour to an hour and a half.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct.
What does the crew do inside there during that amount of time? Because there's only so long that they can actually sit in there. Is that correct?
That's correct. They can sit in there up to 2.5 hours, and that's why they held the crew out this morning for that additional hour. So if we got into this point and they had to stay there for 1 hour, there'd be no problem.
The original delay that we had this morning from the 9:59 launch time was due to an upper level wind problem.
Right.
Is that what is continuing this delay, or is there no real way to know that?
Well, I'd say there's several things, Dave, that's causing this delay. Number one, I think they're catching up on the paperwork, as I said before. They're looking in the firing room to see, is there anything, any stone left unturned that they haven't looked at, because they want to make absolutely sure everything is correct when they pick up the clock at T-minus 9 minutes. They turn it over to the computer at that point, and it's out of human hands at that time. So they're taking their last look before they go to automatic.
All right, News 4's Cliff Morrison is also up here live at the Kennedy Space Center, and he's been paying very close attention, as you could imagine, to the weather and the weather systems, upper and lower level. Let's go to him right now, Cliff.
Yeah, just real quickly, I wanted to update you. I was monitoring the control, and what they found out from the balloons this morning, the weather balloons that they send up, which they have been periodically, that the winds indeed are within range, So whatever the half-hour delay is for, I'm sure it's for some of the incidentals you've been talking about. I was also monitoring, they had a couple problems with some valves. Also, they had reported, as I was monitoring them, that the water level inside the craft was a little bit below. But as you had mentioned, these are minor problems, and certainly the wind is now cooperating. So we have some good news. Back to you, David.
Okay, thank you very much, Cliff. Cliff saying that you might not have heard this, Jim, that the weather is in a good situation. The upper winds are fine, and the lower level winds are fine. The cloud cover has not been bad here this morning. So the problem, if there is a problem, and we don't really know if there is, but it's not weather-related at this point. They're looking at other systems.
Fantastic, because that's the thing we've been worried about all day, were these winds. And if those winds have now gotten back into a value that's acceptable, I think we stand a very good chance of going. In fact, I can sense the tension picking up in the crowd right now.
So that gives you the, you sort of, after having been here years and years and years, you can judge the launch.
You can sense the tenseness in the crowd that everybody is getting ready to go. And I mean, we have a tremendous crowd here today.
When I read through the material looking at things that could conceivably delay the launch beyond 1 day, I think one of the things that jumps out at you also is the red line problem that can develop with the computers after Bob Crippen says all right. Because at this point, they have so many things that they have to pay attention to. Something could go wrong.
Oh, absolutely. We have twice as many red line criteria on this vehicle as we had on STS-24, the last successful vehicle. So the safety committees and the oversight committees and the engineers have scoured everything and added many measurements since that time.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. And of course, you know, we'll be standing by here at the Kennedy Space Center live, as we have been this morning, and we will be all day long. But right now, we want to take it to Dan Rather and CBS as the countdown continues.
Good day again. The countdown's on a scheduled hold at 9 minutes. But things and the wind may be looking up. The winds at, say, 25,000 feet and above over us are now running close to the margin of safety NASA needs to launch Discovery today. 11:20 Eastern Time is now the earliest it's considered they can launch. The latest would be shortly before 2 p.m. Eastern Time. The astronauts are ready, the shuttle is ready, NASA is ready. They're just waiting, still waiting, for word that the wind speeds have picked up enough and the wind direction has shifted enough in line with what the Discovery computers have been programmed to handle. The Discovery crew members have been told to hang in there. They and we will be doing just that. We're here waiting to let you know if and when the countdown resumes and the winds are right. 11:20 Eastern Time, now the earliest time that they will launch. So from Hang in There headquarters at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, Dan Rather. See you later.
This special report has been part of CBS News' continuing coverage of the flight of Discovery.
The first satellite space salvage mission. 42-year-old Richard Dick Covey is the pilot, an Air Force test pilot. He has logged more than 4,000 hours. He piloted Discovery on a virtual error-free flight in August 1985. And it was his voice everyone heard, giving the final instructions to Challenger crew, go at throttle up. John Mike Lounge, 42-year-old astrophysicist. He is in charge of deploying a communications satellite aboard Discovery. A former Navy aviator, he now flies once a week with the Texas Air National Guard. 38-year-old Marine Lieutenant Colonel Dave Hilmers is a computer genius. He flew on the first flight of Atlantis and will be the flight engineer on this trip. George Pinky Nelson, the youngest member of the crew, the only one who has walked in space. He has a doctorate in astronomy and plays in an all-astronaut rock and roll band called Max Q. So it's a different crew. We've never had one with all shuttle veterans before. No rookies this time.
Well, Bruce, we're keeping a close eye on things here. We all have our fingers crossed, knocking on wood, saying a little prayer that they can get it up today. While we wait and see whether they start the clock running again, let's take a break. We'll be right back.
No constraints.
The consensus is to proceed with NASA, go for launch. We expect to start the countdown again at any moment now. They're looking to launch in approximately 9 minutes from now. However, the clock has not yet started. T-9 and holding as the anticipation level continues to rise here. They've made their checks among themselves. Consensus to proceed. Go for launch was the last word we had. And let's pick up the voice of NASA control here if we can for just a moment.
Go PTC. Okay, iOS went ahead and has finished their final launch configuration. Okay, I copy. Nonetheless, we'll establish a new time and then come out of this count upon that time. And Flight Director, excuse the interrupt, proceed. Okay, well that's and we can.
Now, the important word there is to proceed. And joining me again here at our CBS News coverage headquarters at the Space Center is Jeff Hoffman, astronaut Jeff Hoffman. Jeff, you went through this same thing yourself, a long delay strapped into that space shuttle. What are the astronauts thinking and doing right now, and what should we be looking for as we anticipate the start of the clock?
Let me set the stage for you a little bit. When you see on the screen the steam and the smoke coming out of the engines of the shuttle and coming out the external fuel tank, what you want to realize is that today, fueled up finally and ready to go, the space shuttle it's almost like a living being as opposed to a dead piece of hardware. When you go out on the pad on launch day and you see the smoke and the flame and the fire and the water and you hear the creaks and the groans, the machine has come alive, and it's a feeling of excitement that it gets into the crew's blood. So, you know, I know how much they want to go, and things are looking good now. They have basically completed all of the arrangements that we expected up to the 9-minute hold. The computers are in launch configuration. The cabin has been sealed up. The pressure integrity has been checked. They've checked all of the equipment preparatory to starting up the hydraulic units, which will be done about 4 minutes into the count, and so far so good.
Jeff, I wanted to explain, when people saw you with your hand up to your ear, that what you're doing is you're holding up a listening device there.
I'm listening to the crew talking to launch control, so in case anything happens, I'll be able to give you an update.
Just wanted to explain, because people are not accustomed to seeing people on television anymore holding that kind of apparatus up to the air, but it's to ensure that we hear that everything being said. The crew is in close communication, and you can imagine that inside the orbiter, they've been ready in there. Well, one way of putting it, they've been ready for 2.5 years to fly. But they've been in the orbiter this morning. If you recall, they expected to go at this morning shortly before 10 o'clock Eastern Time.
And they're planning to come out of the hold about 3 minutes from now.
What that means is approximately 3 minutes from now, we'd start the countdown of the clock.
Which would mean about an 11:37 launch.
All right, an 11:37 launch now being anticipated, because the countdown has not yet resumed, although everything looks good now for the countdown to resume. We have a 9-minute countdown once they start counting down, hoping for a liftoff at 11:37. What about the wind problem? Well, the winds began picking up way up there and got in more consistent with what NASA had programmed into its computers. And Bruce Hall, we've been in this situation, this kind of situation, so many times before, where the tension level is high, we're anticipating the clock is about to start, but until you actually get the liftoff, you aren't going to know this is going to go.
You never know, and we've gone down several times to the last couple of seconds. We had a couple of times where we've had an abort at T-3 seconds, T-4 seconds. And we've, in a very technological world, and it's a very complex machine. Our hold that we've gone through right now, it's a very simple problem. The astronauts and a couple of the controllers were not able to hear the weather report. And so as the latest information was being relayed, they couldn't hear. So now we're having this delay of about 5, 6, maybe 8 minutes because of that.
Jeff, if you are hearing something of utmost importance at the moment, this is part of the change in philosophy, if that isn't to state it, to overstate it, that NASA has had. That there was a time when NASA was looking to go much more than they are now. The attitude these days is, look, if we don't have everything, that all of our criteria are not in order, then we're not going to press it, we're not going to rush it. We have a lot of time. We'll put
But I got to say one thing. We are still looking to go. But you're right. As far as criteria like the weather and so on, as opposed to an innocent until proven guilty, we've got to assume guilty until proven innocent. Unless everybody can demonstrate positively that we're ready to go, we don't go.
Now, when they resume the clock, which we expect to happen very shortly, with
about 1 minute.
We hope to start it within 1 minute. Now, if the clock resumes, which the countdown starts then, the next thing to happen is the ground computer automatic launch sequence will begin.
That's correct.
All functions remain under ground computer control until the shuttle computer takes over at
31 seconds before the launch.
seconds.
Some of the important things you should be looking for, about 8 minutes, we're going to start the process of bringing the computer onto its own internal power using its own fuel cells. About 7 minutes, you'll see the white room swing away. In case of a launch emergency where the crew had to get out quickly, it could come back in about 15 seconds. At T-5 minutes, they're going to start up the hydraulics. This is what is going to power the air surfaces, the ailerons, the rudder, and most important, the main engine steering. Looks like...
Let's watch the clock to see if
we're just getting ready to pick it up.
5 seconds to go.
T-9 minutes and counting.
Fantastic.
The countdown events are now being controlled by the ground launch sequencer from now until the T-12.
And let me point something out to you. When the hydraulics do come on, we will then start to test all of the equipment. You'll see in the close-up views of the shuttle, the ailerons will start to move, and eventually we'll actually see the engine bells moving. And this is an incredible moment for the astronauts sitting in there, because they can feel the entire shuttle start to shake. This is about 3.5 minutes before launch, and it's a spooky feeling, really, to be sitting there knowing that you're not supposed to launch for another 3.5 minutes, and yet all of a sudden things start to shake underneath you.
All right, 8:20 to go. Unless the clock stops, it'll be launched in 8:16, 8:15, 8:14 seconds. When do you feel it, Jeff Hoffman, that you're really going to go? Is it that moment when they say, put your visor down?
I think for me that was it, and that's what a lot of people say. When, you know, all the equipment is getting ready, but your final preparation for launch is that moment when you say, crew, you go to close your visors come down, and I remember saying, all right, we're going.
Well, they haven't put the visors down yet. That would happen at T-4. We're at T-745.
And that, in fact, I heard Rick Hauk mention that they might want to delay that a little bit, and we'll stand by on that call.
Well, now, the new launch guidelines are that between T-9 and T-5, that's where we are now, being at T-7.5, the ground launch system will be monitoring between 20% and 50% more items before committing to launch than was the case on previous shuttle flights.
And I think that's typical. By the way, there we see the access arm is retracting.
Back into position within about 15 seconds.
This arm is swinging away. The white room arm is swinging away from the shuttle.
One of the new things actually is an improved evacuation system from the whole pad.
7 minutes and counting.
And that access arm there is the first step of that. That access arm, of course, is not new. That's something that we always have had. They're in the process now of connecting the fuel cells up to power the shuttle's electrical system. So far, so good.
And the next thing to happen will be the pre-start the shuttle auxiliary power units. And that'll happen, in about 35 seconds.
Dan, that is one item
6
that
minutes,
has given
30
us some troubles
seconds
in the past. That has been a problem sometime in the earlier launches in particular. But so far, it looks pretty good.
Auxiliary power units, or APUs, at the 6-minute point. This consists of positioning a number of
and launch control is making preparations for starting up the hydraulic systems. At this point, what you have to realize is that the guts of the system are starting to come alive. They're getting ready to pre-start the APU, which means to put the auxiliary power unit into its launch configuration. This power unit is powering the hydraulic system. Just to give you an idea of what's involved here, imagine an engine the size of what is in your car putting out 50,000 horsepower. That's what these auxiliary power units are doing. And you can imagine what's involved in making sure that they all work successfully.
Now, in about a half a minute, it's T-5:30. The next important thing to happen to the auxiliary power units are activated to provide hydraulic power to the shuttle. And if any difficulty should develop in that, the auxiliary power units being activated to provide that hydraulic power to the shuttle, that would be trouble. So this is the thing to look for. Let's pick up NASA's official voice on the countdown and see how that goes, the activating of those auxiliary power units.
T-5 minutes and counting.
This is go for orbiter APU start. And BLT, perform the APU pre-start. Roger, and work.
Pilot Dick Covey now is flipping the 3 switches in the cockpit to start each of the 3 APUs. The liquid oxygen replenishing of the LOX tank has been terminated at this point, and the liquid oxygen fill and drain valve is closed.
The voice is Hugh Harris.
4 minutes, 30 seconds.
You see the APUs are up and running. Copy that.
Right.
The auxiliary power units up and running, according to pilot Dick Covey.
VDR, reconfigure heaters. Roger, that's complete.
As the tank is prepared for full pressure.
And they will now be testing the various systems which are powered by hydraulic
Coming up on
powers,
the
as I said, the
4-minute
flight controls,
point
and
in
most
the
important, the engine steering.
Yes, so that's been done.
The crew has...
We're at that point where the final helium purge of main engines is conducted, and the crew should be told to close visors and breathe pure oxygen any moment now. Let's pick it up.
Underway. The orbiter flight control surfaces, such as elevons, speed brakes, and rudders, are now being moved through a pre-programmed pattern to verify that they're ready for launch.
You can see the rudder moving.
Just begin to see that rudder move just a little in there.
And that's when the astronauts really begin to feel things inside.
Keep your eye on the engine bells now. There's the engine bells starting to move.
Moved in a pattern to verify their readiness to support the ascent flight control. After going through their paces, they'll be aligned to their start position.
Which gives the shuttle the ability to steer while it's flying.
Middle of the screen, you can see those tests being run to make sure
We're coming up on the
that they work.
3-minute point
Apparently
in
they
the
do.
count at T-minus 2 minutes 55 seconds. The start of the external tank liquid oxygen pressurization will
Just
begin.
very
3
quickly,
minutes and counting.
what you'll be seeing
And the gaseous
about 10
nitrogen
seconds
purges
before
of
the
the main
launch will be a
engines will be
deluge of
terminated.
water splashing.
The ground launch sequencer has started to retract the gaseous oxygen vent hood or beanie cap on the external tank.
Like to have a clear caution warning memory and verify no unexpected errors.
The computers will make a final check to ensure the vent arm is fully retracted at the 37-second point. T-minus 2 minutes 30 seconds and counting. Ground supplies of hydrogen and oxygen for the orbiter fuel cells has been turned off. Discovery is now running on its onboard reactants.
The beanie cap is coming off the top of the external tank there, so.
Coming up on the 2-minute point in our countdown.
So, gentlemen, and for those of you who are in the audience, let's say as little as possible from 2 minutes down and hope this baby gets up.
T-minus 2 minutes and counting. Liquid hydrogen replenish of the external tank has stopped and pressurization to flight level is underway. The vehicle is now isolated from all ground propellant and fluid loading equipment.
Roger, that's complete. CLS is go for ET LH2 pressurization.
T-minus 90 seconds and counting. Less than 2 minutes away from the launch of STS-26 and its crew of 5.
1 second, future failure.
And we have heard that the clock will hold at 31 seconds.
And TDSC, it's a cabin pressure rate of change. Okay, copy. DCO.
We're anticipating the clock will hold at T-minus 31 seconds due to a failure. We have not heard what that is yet.
It's going down.
Cabin pressure.
Probably due to the increase.
Not good news. They're going to stop it at
Okay, when you're
31
concerned,
seconds.
clear the air and proceed.
Jeff?
That's correct. The words I heard were a cabin pressure rate of
50
change.
seconds and counting. We're going to clear
And what
the
does that
air.
mean?
Well, I want to hear if that has anything to do with the fact that the crew had just put down their visors. That gives an extra spurt of oxygen into the cabin. It's something they've done before, but I think we have to stand by.
Not stopping the clock.
Not stopping the clock, so 34
That was
seconds
my
to
guess
go.
of what happened.
31 seconds. We have a go for auto sequence start. Discovery's 4 redundant computers have assumed T-minus 23 seconds and counting. The SRB nozzle profile. T-minus 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. We're go for main engine start. 7, 6, start. 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Roger, roll, Discovery. Crew confirms roll program. Houston now controlling. 3 engines at 104%.
Go, baby.
3 good APUs, 3 good fuel cells. Standing by to begin throttle down to 65%.
Yeah.
Engines throttling down now to maintain certain speed as the spacecraft passes through max gear. Three engines at 65% now. Standing by to see engines begin to throttle back up at about 59 seconds. Mark 1 minute, velocity 2,300 feet per second, altitude 5.9 nautical miles, downrange distance 3 nautical miles. Discovery, go at throttle up.
Roger, go.
Discovery given a go at throttle up, 3 engines at 104%, velocity 3,200 feet per second, altitude 10.8 nautical miles, downrange distance 8 nautical miles. 25 seconds from solid rocket booster separation. 1 minute, 45 seconds. 3 engines at 104%. Velocity 4,800 feet per second, altitude 20 nautical miles, downrange distance 19 nautical miles. Standing by for solid rocket booster separation.
These are the solid rocket boosters dropping away as they are supposed to do.
Solid rocket boosters have separated. 2 minutes, 20 seconds.
Shuttle has passed 150,000 feet up and more.
5,600 feet per second velocity, 31.8 nautical miles. Altitude, downrange distance, 38 nautical miles.
The crew's experienced an acceleration of about 1 G at this point. Prior to SRB separation, they were up
3
to about
APUs
2.5
still running at
Gs.
normal speed. 3 good fuel
Still
cells.
have that huge external tank, which will go with them all the way to drop at this time 600 miles from Hawaii.
The ride is now extremely smooth.
We'll be hearing some call-ups here shortly from the Capcom about the capability to reach transatlantic sites.
Riding the solids is like being
Velocity
inside a train
6,200
wreck.
feet per second. Altitude 41 nautical miles. Downrange distance 60 nautical miles.
Well, as Discovery begins to fade out of view from even our television cameras, up there and out there, everything looks and sounds, Jeff Hoffman, to be working extremely well.
But remember, it's not over until it's over. So we got 5 minutes still to get up into space, and we've got to stand by. I guess we have some animation.
Discovery, 2-engine Marone.
That means if they lose
That call-up indicating Discovery may be able to achieve a transatlantic abort at Marone if that were to become necessary. Return status and mission control positions all report go.
This is animation that you're seeing here. Since Discovery is out of sight now, what they're talking about is if it should become necessary, this is standard procedure, they'd put it down at an emergency landing site in Spain. No indication of any difficulty, but these are the critical moments. Having shed its solid rocket boosters at about 150,000 feet, or maybe slightly above that.
Negative return.
The shuttle, the orbiter is still attached to the liquid fuel tank. Still riding with that liquid fuel tank as it goes hundreds of miles up.
They can no longer return to the Cape, even if
4
they lose
minutes,
an
20
engine.
seconds. Velocity 8,700 feet per second. Altitude 59 nautical miles. Downrange distance 148 nautical miles.
We had one shuttle flight where we lost a single engine. Our flights are designed so we can lose a single engine at any time and still recover the shuttle and the crew safely.
Now, it's 4 minutes and 40 seconds since the liftoff. Everything looks good. The next thing to look for will be at about the 7.5 minute mark when the engines begin to throttle back to avoid the shuttle approaching 3 Gs, or gravitational pull, which the equipment could not tolerate.
If they lose an engine,
Call-up
they can
indicates
make it to
Discovery
orbit.
could reach and abort to orbit on 2 engines if that were to
They're
become
going to be able to
necessary.
make it to orbit now.
All right, the good news, they can make it to orbit. Even if they were to lose an engine now, a single engine, one single engine, they could make it into orbit.
65.7 nautical miles, downrange distance 203 nautical miles.
We're about 3.5 minutes away from a next real crucial movement, and that is with the main engine cutoff, which will come at about 8 minutes, 30 seconds into the flight. And at that point, they're in orbit.
And Bruce, people are, excuse me, Jeff, for one moment, people sometimes are confused. You're looking at our animation, and we give you the next event, the next most important thing, main engine cutoff. That's the MECO. Main engine cutoff at 8:31. Shuttle begins to prepare for external tank separation at that point. The speed in miles per hour, you can see time from liftoff is 5:41. But, Bruce, you see the orbiter is riding upside down. People sometimes say, well, their animation got off. Not true. This is the way the orbiter is riding at the moment. It is riding below, if you will, attached to, but below its liquid oxygen and hydrogen liquid fuel tank.
This is the way that it goes into space, and during a variety of times during the trip, they will be riding upside down. And it is something that is easily to confuse people with, but due to the methods that we have to go into space, this is the safest and the best way to get there, with the huge external tank, the fuel tank, on top, which will remain there until they make almost the first orbit.
Achieve a single-engine landing at Van Jewel, if that were to become.
If you will, look in the right-hand corner of your screen, we give you the down range of approximately where the Discovery is in relation to the Earth's surface. In addition to time from liftoff, it's plus 6 minutes and 40 seconds, the speed in miles per hour, And the next major event, which is, as we mentioned, is the main engine cutoff to come at about the 8.5-minute mark. Jeff?
Let's also remember at MECO, we will be in space. We will not actually be in orbit until we fire our maneuvering engines 45 minutes after launch. But we will have gotten through surely the most risky part of the whole mission.
Jeff, it's incredible to believe that it's now traveling at a speed of about 12,000 miles per hour. Its top speed, when it reaches its top speed, about
17,000.
About 17,000 miles per hour. Well, everything looks and sounds excellent at the moment, does it not, Jim?
Even if they lose 2 engines, they can still make it to orbit.
Another milestone passed. Even if they were to lose 2 of the engines now, they could still make it into orbit.
The other thing that's happening now, we have full thrust out of the engines, but because so much fuel has been burned off and it's lighter, the acceleration has built up. The crew is being pressed down into their seats with a force of 3 times Earth's gravity, and in order to avoid exceeding that, the engines are actually starting to throttle down. Let's remember, these are the first rocket engines of this size that have ever been able to throttle down.
As we wait for main engine shutdown, let's go to Peter Van Sant, who was watching with thousands of other people here at the Cape. Peter?
Dan, NASA just scored the winning touchdown late in the 4th quarter with these folks. There was tremendous cheering, excitement. Despite the fact we're about 13 miles away, you could still feel some of that vibration, and the sound was tremendous. I've got a couple of people here who just watched the launch. What'd you think?
Unbelievable. It was so great. I mean, I almost feel like crying. I'm so proud to be an American. I've been here all night long. It's fantastic. It's unbelievable. Words can't describe it. For all the people sitting back home, you know, in their living room watching it, it's nothing like being here watching it. It's just right over there. Unbelievable. I'm so proud. It's great.
We're back in space.
Thank God. All right.
How about you?
Yes, unbelievable. I'm from England, and, well, just to be here is absolutely a miracle. You know, to see that go up was something I've always wanted to see, and I'm glad I did.
Tremendous. Back to you, Dan. Lots of enthusiasm.
Thanks, Peter. Now, let's set the scene for you. Everything looks and sounds perfect, as best anyone can determine. The launch has reached the point where even if Discovery should have 2 engines fail, they could make orbit. We're just told they are in orbit. They have just now reached orbit, and what good news that is.
Altitude. Standing by for external tank separation.
They're going to drop the large external tank now, which will eventually fall back down into the ocean.
Waiting for word that they've done that. Always a major moment when the external tank separates from the shuttle itself and leaves the orbiter there in orbit.
And this is an incredible...
Discovery, your goal for APU shutdown on time.
That means mission control is satisfied that they can stay in orbit. So they're going to shut down their hydraulic systems. They're no longer needed.
Power to operate the aerodynamic services and to gimbal the engines.
We've got a great flight.
Well, on that line, that bottom line, at this moment, we've got a great flight. Discovery is in orbit. Let's pause for this message.
We interrupt this program to bring you live coverage of the launch of Discovery. From the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral, here is News 4's David Jackson.
I'm David Jackson, live at the Kennedy Space Center, and I don't think I've ever been happier to be on live television in my entire life, because the thrill 12 and a half minutes ago of the Discovery launching was just almost more than you can believe sitting right here. We're really, really excited about what we saw. Jim Mizell, of course, still with me here, and we've been watching it all morning long, and we went through the holds. Now the launch was just, as I said, 12 and a half minutes ago. We're taking a look at the videotape of that and off, and Jim, it's really an achievement, and it's really stunning when you're sitting here, isn't it?
Oh, yes, Dave. It is really an emotional experience. It's something that psychologically we needed for the nation and the people, and it was an absolutely perfect liftoff. And when you think of the 32 months of despair that the NASA people have had, I know that the people in the Launch Control Center are absolutely overjoyed.
I'll tell you something, because even for myself, I've seen many of these on television, you know, over the past few years, and it is really not like being here. I mean, when the solid rocket boosters are kicking, it is thumping you in the chest, and it is really something else.
Well, David, that's some horse to ride there. You know, the astronauts say that that's the roughest thing they've ever ridden until they get to the shuttle. main SRB cutoff, and then it's smooth from that point on.
Yeah, well, they'll be back around in just about 90 minutes, and they'll be flying over Miami. So if people want to try and look out the window, maybe they'll see a
Well,
speck.
Miami will be the major city they'll pass over on the first orbit.
All right, thanks for being with us. We'll be back with a little bit more a little bit later on News 4 at noon when we come back. So reporting live, I'm David Jackson. Now back to programming in Miami.
I can remember clearly 2 years ago we were sitting here watching it, and I saw clearly today what the future of our space program is, and maybe just as important, what the future of education is for these kids.
Terrific. Krista McAuliffe said, "I touch the future, I teach." These kids are going to be watching on a computer, tracking the shuttle as it goes along, and they're also, by the way, Dan, tracking the Soviet space station. And Ron told me that they're both, or were at least at one point, both at the same longitude. Back to you, Dan. I'm with the Dreamers.
Thank you, Leslie. Aren't we all dreaming today? Joining us now is Michael Collins, who was on board Apollo 11, the launch that went to the moon. I know you're excited about what happened here today. Your impressions?
That was just a wonderful launch, Dan. I've never seen a finer one. Of course, waiting around an extra hour or two doesn't hurt things either. Your feeling of anticipation.
Here's the tape replay of the liftoff.
Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Crew confirms roll program. Houston now controlling.
Michael, as you saw this happening, Michael Collins, what were you thinking? At this particular moment, they were just about reaching the point, soon to reach the point where we had the terrible Challenger disaster. It must have flashed through the mind.
65%.
I think so, and especially the mind of the crew, of course, as the same terminology in the air-to-ground, ground-to-air voice was used, so they were hearing the same messages, of course, that the Challenger crew heard. But as I was watching it, I was thinking back to Saturn V days and sort of looking comparatively at the two machines. They're quite similar, but quite different. This one gets up and goes a bit quicker than the old Saturn V used to do.
Ending Midas C engines began to throttle back up at about 59 seconds.
Well, what a sight this was to see it disappear
Mark 1 minute,
intact
velocity 2,300 feet per second, altitude 5.9 nautical miles, downrange.
The main purpose of this flight to get out the tracking and data relay system satellite. This is a $100 million satellite, identical to the one destroyed aboard the Challenger. That's the main purpose of this mission. Other purposes are what?
Well, they'll do a number of scientific experiments during the 4 days that they're up there, but as you say, the deployment of this communication satellite will allow NASA to save a lot of money in that it won't need the extensive network of ground stations that we used to require during Apollo days. 2 of these satellites in orbit will give NASA almost continuous coverage. So just as satellites are very much a part of our lives, communication satellites allowing us to see the Olympics, so NASA is using them to best advantage.
And Jeff Hoffman, very briefly, the astronauts are in orbit now. They haven't made one complete circle of the Earth. What are they thinking and what are they doing?
Right now, they are busy as anything. There's a lot of things to do to get a shuttle, once it's in space, ready to stay in orbit. That's what they're working on. I'd like to say one thing. We just heard our launch director thank the launch crew, and I know it's something that the astronauts are very aware of, is they may be on top of the pyramid, and they're the ones in space, but there's thousands of people who have done an awful lot of work to get them there, and they appreciate it, and we all appreciate it.
As we said on last night's CBS Evening News, NASA was the can-do agency that worked. It was eager to prove that it still worked, and this morning, so far, it has done exactly that.
I think it's important to remember this is a first step. It's a big first step. We've still got a mission to go ahead of us, and it's also true that one mission doesn't make a space program. We've got a lot of work to get our space program back going, but this is a great way to start.
We'll take a break and come back after these messages. Up there, out there, on the high frontier, they're waiting for the final burn to put them in what they scheduled orbit. That's what's happening at the moment. They want to fire those small orbiter engines that allow them to maneuver themselves into that, for this mission at least, ultimate orbit. You hear a lot that this is a shakedown mission, nothing too daring being attempted on the first flight of the shuttle in 32 months. But Correspondent Charles Osgood reminds us that this may be, in some ways is, the most daring and courageous shuttle crew of them all.
It is dangerous, of course. To challenge the frontiers of knowledge or of space means always to put someone's life on the line. Experience has taught us that painful lesson. None of us has forgotten so soon or ever can forget.
This is Freedom 7. The fuel is go.
John Glenn reports he is ready.
But remembering it, to accept the danger and to go ahead anyway, that is true courage. What these astronauts do is all the more awesome because they know so well the chance they take. They do it in the name of the others who have gone before and those who are to come. At such moments, they are mankind at its noblest and most vulnerable.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Excelsior, the ancient Greeks said, always upward.
And it has cleared the tower.
In a way, we ride with them, for how can the rest of us not be moved and inspired in striving for our own dreams by those who risk so much to reach for the stars? Charles Osgood, CBS News.
Well, the next big event, it will be at 5:50 p.m. At 5:50 today, that would be Eastern Standard Time, when they try to launch the so-called TDRS, the Tracking and Data Relay System satellite. We will, of course, have complete coverage of today's good news discovery up there and in orbit on the CBS Evening News later this evening. So until that time, unless there are developments, at which time, of course, we break in and tell you about them, Dan Rather with Bruce Hall. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you later.
This is WTVJ, Miami, Fort Lauderdale.
Live from the heart of South Florida, this is News 4 at noon.
Up and away, and all is fine. The 26th mission of the Space Shuttle program and America's re-entry into the race for space started just minutes ago at Cape Canaveral.
And liftoff. Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Good afternoon, everybody. We want to take you straight there to the Cape right now, where News 4's David Jackson is standing by to give us the very latest on what happened this morning.
David.
Gordon and Pam, it's been an exciting morning here, as you can imagine, and my pulse is still a little bit quicker than normal for this time of the day, that's for sure, after witnessing what we saw here. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful launch, as people saw on videotape just a moment ago when the newscast began. It was an exciting moment, and it was a moment that was not certainly lost on anyone here in its poignance and its importance, least of which being the engineers who work here at NASA. We've been up here before for some of the engine tests, and these are men and women who had gathered out at the fence to watch all the tests that day had taken place, and these are people who are extremely happy this morning. Take a look at them.
Thing I've ever seen. Number 26 made it.
I'd never seen one before. This is the first time I've been here. It's awesome. Totally awesome.
I'm just glad to see it back in space.
So you looking to the future?
Definitely, definitely.
Since the first one, and this is by far more exciting than any other one.
Why?
Because it's a long culmination of 2.5 years of work after the accident. And it was hard to get through, and we're very, very happy. It's a very emotional moment for all of us in the whole country.
Imagine the thrill for those people. 32 months is a long time of a drought of spaceflight, and those are people that had been working very hard and were very pleased to have witnessed what they saw. Now with me again at noon here today is Jim Mizell, who was the NASA operations manager here and has been at the Kennedy Space Center for a long, long time. And it got to be routine a little bit for you, Jim, I think, along the way, because it did for everybody, but nothing more special than what you saw today.
Oh, yes. You know, even after 24 successful launches and then the Challenger accident, this is a special one because so many people have worked so hard with so much criticism, and they pulled themselves back up to a successful launch. And the Atlantis is sitting poised to go over to the VAB and out to the pad. and I hope next month or shortly thereafter, the next launch will take place and be just as successful.
We had no difficulty. We had a few minor glitches and a little bit of a delay from the original scheduled launch time, and that was primarily due to some weather questions that arose early on. News 4's Cliff Morrison is also up here at the Kennedy Space Center with us, and he watched the weather with us this morning, and he has an update down on exactly what took place and where we are. Cliff?
You know, even up to the last minute, I'd say even about 2 minutes before takeoff, they were thinking of scrubbing it because of the winds in the upper levels. Once again, those problematic winds had kicked up a little bit, and they had finally given the go-ahead and said, well, that's not going to be a major problem. Let's go ahead and let's take off. And as that happened, about a few seconds after that, Bob Seeks on the line, he said, well, we've gone from the depths of despair to the heights of discovery. And it was good to hear those words, and I'll tell you what, it was great to see that sight. Right now, the transatlantic abort landing sites, so weather reports now in Africa, Morocco, Spain, New Mexico, all looking good. The weather forecast for Edwards Air Force Base on Monday still looks a little bit windy, but we have confidence that perhaps that even too will work out as the weather also cooperated with the launch. Back to you, David.
All right, thank you very much, Cliff. And as we mentioned, only an upper level wind situation that caused a delay momentarily in the early countdown, but that proved to be all right, and the Discovery is up and in place and where it should be right now. It was interesting, we were talking with Jim a moment ago about how quickly these guys get to work up there, because it doesn't take them very long. This mission is underway, and that means that they've got a job to do. They've got a satellite to put in position. They do that 6 hours and 13 minutes into this flight, which is pretty quick.
Very fast.
They're already on the other side of the world.
Oh, well, they're a third of the way around the world. They're going to drop the external tank just south of Hawaii. At the present time, they're opening the payload bay doors because the heat radiators inside the shuttle are in the doors, and they can't get rid of the heat from all the equipment until those doors are open.
Is that heat actually from the liftoff itself that gets trapped inside the compartment in there?
It's all the electronics in the compartment are all on internal until you open those doors and get that heat back out into space.
It'll be a very interesting mission because they will deploy their satellite, and then they can more or less relax for about 3 or 4 days while they are up there.
Right. Well, one of the special things about the shuttle is that in a 6-hour period, it can point so accurately that the computers on board can determine exactly where that satellite is going to be in 6 hours. Other missiles can't do that. It takes days to get the missile in the right position.
Well, we certainly hope that they have a productive and yet uneventful time up there for 4 days, and we're certainly hoping for that.
Well, Dave, they're on their way.
That's right.
That's the best part of this trip. They're on their way, and I guarantee you they're doing some good work up there right now.
All right, thanks, Jim. We have some work to do here this afternoon as well, and we'll be back with everybody, of course, with more on News 4 at 5:30 and again at 6 o'clock. Reporting live, I'm David Jackson. Now back to Miami. Pam and Gordon, back to you.
Okay, David, thank you. You know, Pam and I are very jealous of you because you're up there and we're not on this great day, but great job up there.
It feels great to be back in the space business. Thanks, David. This is also, of course, a big day for students at Southwest Senior High School. One of their teachers was selected as a finalist for the Space Shuttle program.
News 4's Ileana Bravo watched the launch there with the students and teachers this morning. Ileana, they too must be just beaming today.
Beaming is not even the word. In fact, their classroom is right behind me, and they're still cheering from the moment that they've witnessed. I don't know about you, but we all felt butterflies, you know, in anticipation before it went off. And as soon as Discovery went up, it was a moment of exhilaration. In fact, the students, about 50 of them, were crammed into the classroom, turned it into a picnic. They took their lunch period inside the classroom, joining other teachers, and joined in the countdown as Discovery started going up. They began with the countdown, picking it up at 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it was just a very special moment. Hugh Allen, the teacher, as you see there, saying, "Go, baby, go." He was chosen as one of the finalists to go up in the shuttle missions. Of course, after the terrible Challenger disaster, that program was scrapped for the time being. But there she was, as she was twirling, going up. The students not even realizing what it is that they've just seen, according to their teacher. He doesn't think that they even know what they've witnessed.
They don't realize the significance yet. When they're my age, they will realize what they've witnessed. They'll think back on this date. They'll remember where they were, just like some other major event in the news. They will remember this day, because this is our renewal of manned space flight.
And of course, that renewal of man in space could mean the future for these kids. So we'll have reports, the interviews with them, and some reaction later on in News 4 beginning at 5:30. Ileana Bravo reporting live from Southwest Senior High. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Liliana. Of course, you and the students and teachers out there obviously were not the only ones who were glued to a television set. We, of course, were up in the newsroom just a short time ago, and people throughout this nation and all over South Florida were also watching those television sets because they obviously wanted to see exactly what was going to happen. They wanted to see success. Now, this is out at Southwest 27th Avenue and 8th Street, Esperanza Restaurant in Little Havana.